Hello folks, I hope that you are just having a great day today. Today we'll take a look at another book by Fred Saberhagen in the Complete Book of Swords series. This time we're going to be taking a look at the second Book of Swords, published in 1983, the same year actually that the first Book of Swords was published. It's like the first book, it's about 200 pages. It's a little bit more like 209 in this collection, and of the three things. I'll link you to this collection below so you can buy the whole thing. This is an epic work, particularly the first and third books had these epic sweeping things. I've already reviewed the first book in this series. I'll actually link you to that in the comments below in case you want to get caught up. But I love this trilogy just a whole lot, and so it's my pleasure to bring this to you. Now the second book is actually my least favorite book in the series. And I'll talk to you a little bit about why. But what's going to wind up happening is that in the series, in the first book, you're going to find out that the god Vulcan created a number of swords, 12 in particular, that are created as a sort of god's game. We'll find out a little bit why in the first book, and a little bit about what's been going on in some of the world building that's going to happen that Fred Saberhagen writes in the first book. Now the first book is going to basically follow our primary protagonist is Mark, and he is the son of one of the smiths who helped the god Vulcan create the swords. He's a human smith. The god Vulcan realized that he needed help. Some human servants, which would also be good because he could use them to slake the swords in human blood. He'll take George's arm and then give him one of the swords called Town Saver as sort of the prize for him, and a thanks for his help, and sort of his payment. That's what he calls it. George calls it his payment, with the understanding that George was going to pass it on to his firstborn. His firstborn actually dies in the first chapter of the first book, and while yielding Town Saver kills everybody that's attacking all these raiders that are attacking his town, but didn't save the boy. It doesn't apparently save him, but he killed everything that was coming his way, but didn't protect him, so he dies too at the end of the combat. During that, his younger brother Mark accidentally killed somebody with arrows while he was trying to shoot them to help the attackers out. So he grabs the sword and flees, and he's going to be now our main character as he sets out on a quest. He'll meet up with a dragon slayer named Nestor and his apprentices, his apprentice Ben and his assistant Barbara. And he wields another one of the 12 swords, Dragon Slicer. So you're going to find out a lot about Dragon Slicer. Dragon Slicer is one of the major swords in the first book that you're going to take kind of an unpacking of too. There are some other swords that are going to appear in the first book too, like Coin Spinner and the Sight Blinder are going to make appearances as well. So you're going to see several swords in the first book. There's a lot of political great stuff that happens in the first book. Wars, battles, political machinations by potentates. It's a deep book. It's got a lot of great world building in it. I think it's a very strong book. I gave it a 9 out of 10. This book I'm giving a 7 out of 10 too. This book opens up, you're going to be following along with Ben. It opens up years after the first book has finished. Ben has enlisted in the service of the Blue Temple. And the Blue Temple is basically the temple of money. It basically acts as the central bank for this world, this fantasy world that we're in, and it basically does all the sort of banking things that you would expect: loans, business loans, personal loans, mortgages, and it also deposits. And it has huge numbers of temples all over with priests that cast spells and have huge numbers of soldiers. And Ben's a soldier, and he is taking some treasures out to a secret place, which is where all the treasure is stored as a deposit. They're going to encounter a dragon along the way, but this high priest that is leading them there has a spell that he casts to send the dragon off on its own. And Ben realizes that there's no way that all these soldiers are going to be allowed to know the location. They're probably going to be killed, and he realizes that. So what he decides to do is he decides to throw the high priest down the stairs. He shuts it and then runs away. So we're going to follow Ben as he's being pursued and runs away from the Blue Temple and tries to survive. So Ben, who's one of the major characters, we're also going to be introduced to some other characters too. Basically the goal, and you're going to find this out about 3 or 4 chapters into the story, but basically the goal of Ben, Mark, Barbara, and and a group of characters that you're introduced to in the novel, particularly a baron and a wizard and their party, are all going to be basically, and they'll all eventually unite, are going to try to steal the treasure from the Blue Temple. So you're going to find out a lot about the Blue Temple in this story. You're also going to find out a lot about the Red Temple, who's one of their allies, and they are both allies of one of the big bads of the world, which you'll find out not that much about, actually. You'll only know that one of the main potentates from the first book, Sir Andrew, is the enemy of the temples, as well as the Dark King, whom they are allied with. And they're also allies of each other. There's not as much world building that happens in this, and this is basically just a 200-page novel. It's basically just a D&D quest. It feels like a 64-page D&D adventure, where basically you're spending the entire time. I think it's only a 7 out of 10. I'm a little disappointed with the lower stakes that the story had. The first one's a 9 out of 10. It's awesome. I love it. But this one isn't as good. It takes its lower stakes. It would be like taking The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, right? And him writing a sequel to it, which would be awesome, right? I mean, imagine a sequel to The Lord of the Rings by the original writer. And then for his sequel, it's set at the beginning of the Fourth Age, right after Aragorn has taken up the kingship, and there are some orcs that have fled from Saruman and from Sauron that have fled and have taken up shop in a keep right outside the borders of Gondor, and they've been raiding parties and so forth. So Aragorn and his new friend Faramir head out, because those two are surviving, probably still in Gondor after the Lord of the Rings, right? And then the two of them head out, and they set out on a quest to remove and kill all the orcs in this keep. Well, it's a fun story, but exterminating the orcs from a keep just doesn't feel like it's a particularly high stakes story after the huge stakes of the Lord of the Rings, right? Where literally the entire world is on fire. You got lots of people happening, lots of moving parts, lots of moving things happening. And this one, the first book had bigger stakes than the second book does. The third book has some bigger stakes than the second book does. So it just doesn't, it feels like it. It also doesn't have as much world building as the first book has. You learn a lot about the Blue Temple because it's the major antagonist of the story. You learn a lot about the Red Temple, and that's it. You're not going to learn a lot about what's happening. It's years after the first one. You're not going to get caught up on like a whole lot. You'll know that there's like a war going on, but you won't actually be a part of it or have anybody that's involved with it. You won't find out very much about that war of some potentates that were mentioned in the first novel that are now at war in the second novel, but there's not a whole lot of that. I think this is to Fred Saberhagen's detriment. I think he's better when he's taking some time and really investing in world building. It took about 6 hours for me to go back and reread this for the 4th or 5th time for a series that I haven't read since, I was in, for at least 10 or 15 years ago, probably a little bit longer since I actually picked up this trilogy and read it. I love this trilogy a lot. It was my first adult trilogy that I read after The Lord of the Rings. And then I read some more young adult fiction with Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Song series, Dragon Song, Dragon Singer, Dragon Dreams. And then I went back to some mature adult fiction, and this was my first post-Tolkienian adult stories, and I really loved it, and I still do. I think it's just incredibly some strong stuff with the world building and the gods and a lot of other things that are happening. But at the same time, there's some nice things and some nice moments in the story. But at the end of the day, the stakes are lower than they need to be. And I wish, and also the world building is lower than it needs to be too. And I think that both of those are not to the credit of the second book in the series. Now, one of the things I like about Fred Saberhagen is that he doesn't suffer from sequelitis. Swelling. For example, a lot of writers, as they write sequels, their sequels will tend to be bigger than the original books were, and they'll take a whole lot longer to read. A good example of this is J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, where the later ones are a lot thicker than the early novels. Robert Jordan did the same thing. Isaac Asimov does the same thing in the Foundation series. The first three novels are very quick and about readers, but the rest of the books in the series, they're fatter tomes. Right, but Fred Saberhagen doesn't do that. Right, each of these books comes in at about the same 200 or maybe 201, 205, 215 pages. Each of the first three books in my collection, And then in the sequel to this, he's done a huge number of books in the sequels. They're also about 200 pages each in the first 3 Lost Books of Swords. Each of the 3 stories are also about 200 pages long, just a little bit over it in my collection. So I appreciate that he doesn't suffer, and I do think that's to his credit. But there you are. I love the story. I think it's just a whole lot of fun stuff that's happening. Second Book of Swords. Have you read it? What did you think about it? Did you agree or disagree with any of my thoughts, or would you like to talk about it further in the comments below? I would love to talk with you about it, no matter what you think about it, in the comments below. If you like this video, please feel encouraged to hit that subscribe button, because there's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And finally, hey, I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your day and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, right? So the fact that you spent this time with me, wow, it's humbling, and I really appreciate it. So thanks again, and have a great day.